Today I'll be sharing with you my process for scanning both 35mm and 120 film at home. The two main methods typically are flatbed scanners or DSLR/mirrorless scanning. Today we'll be focusing on the latter as it's what I have the most experience in and in my opinion provides the most benefits. One of the main reasons being, doing it yourself, you have full creative control of the look and feel of your work. And this difference can be insane. So what is DSLR scanning? In a nutshell, you're taking high-res macro shots of your negatives. This method is generally much faster, produces a higher resolution and flexibility in editing by taking advantage of shooting in RAW. It's certainly gotten popular over the years, but equally expensive. So here's my disclaimer. I will share with you every single piece of gear that I use, but you certainly don't need everything that I'm sharing to get great results. And I'm assuming that if you're the type of person interested in scanning your own film, you probably aren't a beginner and therefore would have a lot of camera gear already in your arsenal. So I already own this Manfrotto clamp and arm, though you could easily accomplish the same result by leaning the tripod down over the corner of a desk. As a photographer and filmmaker, I already have two cameras, a Canon R5 and this older Sony a7R III, which has an insanely impressive 42 megapixel sensor. And more important than the camera is the lens. Here I have a Sigma 70mm 2.8 macro lens. Any lens will do as long as, and this is the very important part, as long as the macro ratio is a 1:1 ratio. This is crucial because you're taking a photo of a 35mm photo with a 35mm camera sensor. So having a perfect 1:1 image reproduction ratio without any quality loss or cropping. So I prefer to tether my camera to my laptop, meaning I can see exactly what I'm shooting and can control the camera without touching or shaking the camera. And since we're photographing something so small with this macro lens, any camera shake should be avoided. So now we need something to illuminate the film. Here I'm using the CS Light by Cinestill, and coupled with that, in the past I've been using these 35 and 120 film masks from Veloy. The light panel was actually made in consideration with Veloy's film masks, so with the proper cardboard border, which they provide, the masks fit perfectly together. Definitely a great setup, especially for those who are on a budget, as this is probably one of the cheapest combos you can find out there. But I recently upgraded to the Essential Film Holder by Andrew Clifford from the UK. Fair warning, it's just a guy in the UK who's doing this by himself. He's not some large factory. So even with me ordering this in October, I did receive this in January. But it's an awesome product and I've loved using it so far, and I would still recommend it. With that order, I also purchased from him these 35 and 120 masks that include the borders of the film. The intended purpose here is that you take apart the entire thing and replace the existing masks with these. But with some nylon screws I bought, I was able to modify it and kind of jerry-rig it so that I have 3 separate pieces that are much easier to use instead of tearing it down every time. Now we have something to hold the film. Now we have our camera. Now we need to make sure our camera is aligned. The first step to making sure it's perfectly parallel to your film is to use the mirror trick. Place a mirror on top of the same plane as your film and then center the sensor in the reflection. And even though the mirror is up close, you're actually going to want to focus to infinity because you're focusing on the reflected light in the mirror. Now the lens I'm using does have a bit of focus breathing, so I do have to adjust up and down just a little bit as I'm focusing, but what I'll do is open up to the widest aperture, which for me is 2.8, and it's best to focus using a focus peaking setting, and only after it's in focus do I stop down to somewhere between 5.6 and f8, depending on your lens, wherever you can find that sharpest sweet spot. And after I've taken all of these pictures, I will cut up my film and place them in these protective sleeves and then place those sleeves in this archival binder. I still haven't figured out the perfect labeling system yet of how I want to organize my film and my digital scans, but more or less it consists of the date, the camera, the film stock, and then a few keywords of what was on that roll, like a location or maybe a subject. Okay, so now that we finished taking pictures of our pictures, it's time to edit them. I personally use the Lightroom plugin called Negative Lab Pro. It's a $100 plugin, but in my opinion is totally worth it, and does a fantastic job. It honestly gets me about 80 to 90% of the way to complete an image. To use the software, we activate the plugin, dial in a few settings, and hit convert. And it already does such a great job. This plugin is inverting all of the settings because we're working with a negative. So if I want to make broader adjustments, I'll have to export and then re-import that image and edit that instead. And before I wrap up this video, I thought it would be helpful to throw in a complete and full pricing breakdown of every single piece of gear that I use in my personal process. And obviously, the more that you already own and can double dip with your gear, the better. That's it for this video. If you found it helpful, please consider subscribing, and thank you so much for watching.